What if development costs more than what's written on paper? What if progress silences voices that were never meant to be ignored? This is Our Voice Matters Mouse, because silence is not an option. We talk about the stories behind the headlines, the people behind the data, and the hidden costs behind so-called development. Our first episode asks a simple question. The human cost of pig farming, who really pays? If it matters to the land, if it matters to the people, it matters here. The Human Cost of Pig Farming at Bukit Tagar, now streaming. Welcome back to the deep dive. You know how sometimes a problem is just ignored for so long?
Until it just blows up in your face.
Exactly. And when the system finally breaks, the solution has to be immediate, painful, and, well, super expensive. That is exactly where we are heading today. We're doing a deep dive into Selangor, looking at this forced, urgent, total relocation of the state's traditional swine industry. Okay, let's try to unpack this. I mean, our sources are painting this picture of 16 long years.
16 years, yeah.
Of environmental problems and, social friction in Kuala.
Yeah.
And that friction, plus a sudden health crisis, has forced this massive, rapid policy shift, moving the entire industry to a brand new facility, way up at Bukit Tagar.
Right.
So our mission today is to figure out the true cost of that delay. What happens when neglect finally turns into an emergency law, and who ends up paying the price?
It's a really fascinating case study. You have infrastructure, public health, accountability, all colliding.
Yeah.
And the source material is very clear. The conflict is the public health need, from the disease risk, running straight into massive economic pressure.
And the environmental standards, I guess.
Exactly. Plus community anxiety, which is a huge factor. So we need to trace the history of the pollution, find the catalyst that forced this immediate mandate, and then
look at the blueprint for this so-called zero discharge future.
That's the one.
So we're going to look at the past,
Yeah.
which is basically defined by untreated waste. The present, which is all about this big health crisis. And the future, which is this ambitious but completely untested high-tech plan. Let's start with segment 1, the breaking point. I think it's so important to just sit with a number. 16 years.
It's a whole generation almost.
Seriously. 16 years that residents in places like Tanjung Sepat and Kuala Langat had to live with. Completely untreated livestock waste just flowing into their environment.
What did that actually look like for them day to day?
Yeah, what was the real cost?
The sources actually call it a pollution tax.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
And it was paid in quality of life every single day. The description of daily life it's really bad.
Yeah.
We're talking chronic respiratory stress, affecting people's health.
That's from breathing the air.
And a constant lingering foul odor 24/7. You can't even go outside properly. And then on top of that, endless fly infestations. Imagine that inside your house.
Ayo, it's degrading. It's not just a nuisance. It fundamentally changes how you live for over a decade. That kind of sustained suffering must have created huge political pressure, right? But clearly, nothing was happening fast enough.
Nope.
So what was the final straw? What made it so urgent?
Well, this is where the Astana factor comes in.
The palace.
Yeah, the issue reached the very highest level. The sources confirm that on January 10th, 2026, the Sultan of Selangor himself got involved. It turns out even his residence, Istana Pantai Bahagia, was affected by the smell.
Wow. Okay. That changes things.
Big time. The Sultan personally called the decade-long delay unjustifiable. When the Sultan says that, you have to act.
That's it, isn't it? When the highest authority steps in and uses a word like unjustifiable, that moves the issue from just a local complaint to a non-negotiable directive.
Exactly. No more excuses, law. It strips away everything else. And you have to remember the social harmony element, too. The friction from traditional pig farming, being in a majority Malay Muslim state, it added this whole other layer of cultural sensitivity.
So it wasn't just an environmental hazard.
It was seen as insensitive. An imposition on the community.
Okay, so the takeaway here is pretty clear. This wasn't some proactive move towards modernization. This was a forced reaction.
Completely
triggered by people reaching their absolute limit and then intervention from the highest office.
Yeah.
All right, now that we understand the pressure cooker of the past, let's move to segment 2, the race against the clock. Because the urgency wasn't just political, was it? It was biological.
100%. The shift from we should probably fix this to we must fix this now came with the African swine fever, the ASF outbreak.
February 2025.
That's the one. And this raises a really big question. Can you modernize an entire industry fast enough to stop another crisis like this, especially when the current system is so vulnerable?
So give us a sense of the scale. How bad was this outbreak?
It was devastating. The numbers are staggering. Sources say 76,000 pigs were infected. 76,000.
And 56 out of the 114 farms in Kuala Lumpur and Sepang, they all tested positive. By May 2025, they had to cull 30,000 market-ready pigs in Tanjung Sepat alone.
That is a catastrophic failure for public health and for food security. And if you think back to the 16 years of failure, these old-school open-air farming methods basically invited this disaster in, didn't they?
They guaranteed it, Ma. These traditional farms had zero biosecurity. Nothing open to wild boars, birds, anything. So once the disease was in the region, it was inevitable. That lack of a buffer is why public health specialists like that took Dr. Zainal Arifin Omar have warned that the risk of it jumping to humans is critically high without these new buffer zones.
The 500-meter to 1-kilometer ones they're planning.
Exactly. The ASF outbreak just made it crystal clear that the environmental crisis was a ticking public health time bomb.
Okay, the health reasons are undeniable, but modernization is always expensive.
Always.
So the public is now paying for this through inflation, right? How bad is the price shock? Oh, it's profound, and you can measure it directly. We know this effort has led to a massive surge in live pig prices, a 140% increase.
140.
Yep. To put it in ringgit, prices jumped from about RM 7.18 per kilo in 2019 to RM 17.50 by the end of 2025.
That's more than double the price for a staple protein. That really hurts the consumer.
It does.
And the state can't really afford that kind of supply gap because...
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Selangor already imports a lot, right?
You're right. Selangor only produces about 30% of its own needs.
So the culling just wiped out that already fragile supply.
It decimated it. The state has been forced to do this emergency stabilization, importing around 2,000 live pigs every month from Sarawak and Perak.
So there's this huge tension. The public needs safety, but they're paying this heavy, immediate price for years of delay.
A classic catch-22 seller.
So let's talk about the proposed solution. Segment 3, the technical blueprint. What does this massive 202-hectare site at Bukit Tagar promise that Kuala Lumpur couldn't deliver for 16 years?
It promises a complete paradigm shift, moving from an open-air, a cesspool into a controlled industrial system. The whole blueprint is built on 4 core technical targets.
Okay, let's walk through them. First, the environmental core.
That's the Zero Discharge Policy, ZDP. This is the non-negotiable heart of the whole plan. It means absolutely no untreated waste enters the public waterways, period. All waste must be contained and processed on site.
Which was the number one problem before.
Number one problem. Second is biosecurity. This comes from the closed house system.
So sealed buildings.
Exactly. Sealed, climate-controlled units. They have air scrubbers, proper ventilation, all designed to control disease vectors like the wild boars and birds.
And the smell, presumably, for the new neighbor.
And the smell. That's equally important.
So it tackles disease and nuisance at the same time. But what happens to all the waste inside a sealed unit?
That's where the third target comes in, sustainability. The manure isn't just stored, it's converted.
Into what?
Biogas and electricity. This does 2 things. It reduces the waste volume, and it makes the entire facility self-sustaining, power-wise.
Okay, that waste-to-energy part sounds really complex and expensive, especially for an industry that's used to the cheapest methods.
It is the most high-tech and costly part. It needs constant management, dedicated plants. If you fail at this, the whole ZDP fails, and you just have a mountain of waste. The success of Bukit Tagar depends entirely on this model working perfectly at a very large scale.
And the last target, the social guardrail.
The mandatory buffer zone, 500 meters to 1,000 meters between the facility and the nearest houses.
To protect the new neighbors from the problems the old neighbors faced.
Precisely.
This all sounds like a massive infrastructure project. So the big question, who's paying for all this?
And this is where it gets really unique. The 2026 Royal Decree says the project gets 0 ringgit of taxpayer money.
Wait, what? Nothing for the government?
0. It is stipulated as 100% private sector funded.
That's really unusual for a state-mandated project about public health. Why would they do that?
Well, the state government probably wants to avoid taking financial responsibility for an industry that's been so problematic. But this introduces serious risks, The high cost to get in means only 69 active, highly capitalized operators are even identified for relocation.
So the small players are pushed out.
Many of them, yes. Their licenses are being revoked because they just can't afford the tech upgrade. And the risk for the public is, when a project is 100% privately funded and under this much pressure, there's a chance operators might cut corners on environmental rules to save money.
Especially when enforcement has been so weak for the last 16 years.
That is the critical point.
Okay, let's move to our last segment. The problem is solved in Kuala Lumpur, but the anxiety has just moved north. What's the situation with the communities now affected in Hulu Selangor?
The sources confirm the concern has just shifted to places like Felda Songai Tengi Selatan and Felda Soeharto. And their main fear is completely valid, law. They're worried they will inherit the 16-year stench.
They're worried modern pig farming is just a marketing term.
Exactly. They think it's just talk, and the reality will be the same old story.
Which, given the history, is a totally fair skepticism to have. So what is being done to address those fears before anything is built?
The state knows how bad the public trust is. That's why on January 13, 2026, they immediately fast-tracked the social impact assessment, the SIA, and the environmental impact assessment, the EIA. These are meant to be the government's promise to the new neighbors.
A promise that the science backs up the safety claims.
Yes.
But hold on, a proper EIA and SIA can take years. They're doing this under an immediate relocation mandate. How can that be credible?
That is the central governance question, right? We're seeing extreme policy acceleration. The original 3-year plan was just scrapped.
Throw it out the window.
Gone. Relocation is now ordered to be immediate or done by the end of the year. Trying to do a real EIA and construction on that timeline, it creates what they call regulatory compression.
They're just squeezing everything.
And that inherently compromises quality and scrutiny. Environmental groups are very concerned about the speed.
The whole thing is operating under these strict mandates from the top. Can you summarize the Sultan's specific demands for this facility?
The Sultan's demands are very clear. 3 things. 1, zero export of the pork.
Okay.
2, absolutely no state land can be used. And 3, a strict focus only on supplying the existing 30% local non-Muslim demand. It cannot become a pollution engine for international profit.
So a very controlled, local-focused operation. And what about the state government's role in all this?
Their role is purely as a facilitator and enforcer, not an investor. Their main job now is to improve river health and shut down the 100-plus old polluting farms for good.
This has been such a complex deep dive. Let's wrap up with the summary and the final takeaway. We've traced this story from 16 years of neglect,
which created the conditions for a massive disease risk,
to an immediate mandate to relocate an entire industry into a 100% privately funded high-tech ZDP blueprint. The speed here is just historic.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the entire success of this whole thing, it hinges completely on enforcement and the transparency of those fast-tracked assessments. The public is already paying the price now with inflation. But the clean environment, the biosecurity, that's only guaranteed later.
Conditional on a flawless, honest execution.
By private companies.
And that brings us back to the core conflict, doesn't it? Given the documented failures of enforcement over 16 years.
16 long years.
Can a 100% privately funded, profit-driven solution rushed under an immediate mandate truly guarantee zero environmental discharge?
Or does that extreme speed mean you just compromise on the rules and the problem isn't solved, it's just moved somewhere else?
What is the true long-term cost of this rapid pressured modernization? Something for you to ponder. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll see you next time.